Genesis chapter 42 begins with Jacob sending his 10 oldest sons to Egypt to buy some grain for the family, and it ends with refusing to send his youngest son back as part of a second trip. Now, at the time, severe famine had gripped the region, just as Joseph had predicted in earlier episodes. That is in Genesis 41, verses 53 to 56. Now, due to his preparations in Egypt under the authority of the king, Pharaoh, Egypt alone had the grain for its people and surplus to sell to those in danger of starving after 2 years of no crops. Jacob's family was in exactly that position, near starvation. So he sent his 10 oldest sons to Egypt with money. However, Jacob does not send his beloved youngest son, Benjamin, with them. He fears some harm might come to the boy, and he could not bear to lose him, even as he thinks he had already lost Joseph. So, them in arriving in Egypt, the brothers unknowingly experienced an emotional but one-sided reunion. They come to, stand before Joseph himself, bowing low, hoping to purchase their grain. Even 20 years after being sold as a 17-year-old, Joseph quickly somehow recognized them. Unfortunately for them, they did not recognize them. Even as the saying goes, the one who hurts you forgets, but you who's been hurt, you really never forget them. So the brothers were sort of baffled by this Egyptian master and his harsh responses to them. After pointedly questioning them about where they are from and why they've come to Egypt, Joseph sort of flatly accused them of being spies who had come to discover Egypt's military weaknesses for some foreign power. And of course, since they had food, it was some sort of an excuse that they've come to spy and find weaknesses or loopholes through which they could come and drop them. Of course, Joseph's brothers understood his accusation could lead to, long-time imprisonment or even just death. So they quickly, firstly, protested it. That they were honest men, normal human beings, mutual brothers, and some of them of the same man. Literally, they said we are of the same father. They even have one more brother back in Canaan with their father and another brother who is no more, meaning Joseph himself. Pressing them further, Joseph again accused them of being spies and offered one chance to earn his trust. That one moment, in fact, that one of them must return back home, that is to Canaan, and come back with their youngest brother Benjamin. And if they refuse, he will then have to conclude that indeed they're spies. Then Joseph put all of them in prison for about 3 days to think about it. Perhaps Joseph also needed that time to cool off as well and, come up with a better plan. After all, it's very likely he never expected to see his family again ever. It's entirely reasonable for him to be angry, but later verses show that revenge is not something on his. Now, 3 days later, he presented them with a new plan. If they were to follow it, then, well, they will leave. Instead of holding 9 of them and sending one back, he will instead hold just one of them in prison and send the rest back with full sacks of grain. However, they must return with their youngest brother to save Simeon and buy again grain if they ever want to buy more grain. Of course, they had limited options, so the brothers agreed. They had no options anyway, they had no choice, but they were still terrified. Now, speaking, Joseph, to them through some sort of an interpreter who interpreted, Egyptian to Hebrew, who apparently at that moment immediately left. Then they started speaking to each other, some sort of, and they started speaking to each other in some sort of a remorse connected. What was happening to their crime of selling Joseph into slavery over 20 years earlier? The sort of, the guilt sort of, the guilt trip started coming out and started murmuring to each other. Now, with genuine remorse, they acknowledge their guilt, expressing that they indeed deserve what is happening to them, the current suffering. Of course, Joseph, still unrecognized, had it all and wept, disguising his reaction to preserve his sort of secret. Emotional note, of course, Joseph stuck to the plan. He selected Simeon to remain behind and bound him in front of them, as we're going to see that in verses 21 to verses 24. In another twist, Joseph also ordered the brothers' monies to be, sort of secretly returned to their sacks, along with their grain. Now, this might be a combination of charity and a further way of rebuking and testing them. Since they do not know Joseph has arranged this, the revelation terrified them with, when they discovered it along the road home. They were sort of afraid of the Egyptians. Of course, who wouldn't be afraid of the Egyptians at the time? And they would assume that they would stolen the money or the grain or both. So they, imagined having the money back in their grains. The Egyptians would have to interpret that as thieves who have stolen the money, the grains, or, both of them. As expected, Jacob did not take the news well, of course. He lashed out at the 9 of them for losing first Joseph, now again Simeon, and now he expecting him to release Benjamin to them. Oh, Jacob didn't take that well. In fact, he claimed that to lose Benjamin would kill him, that wasn't going to happen. He wasn't going to send him to Egypt. Absolutely not. In an especially crushing moment of favoritism, Jacob claimed Benjamin was the only one he had left, in front of the 9 other sons. Oh, that must have sounded, awkward. However, the famine will not be over anytime soon. And as such, Jacob will have to, rethink about his decision and, you know, be forced to reconsider his stance. He would have to release Benjamin if at all he needs to survive, the famine and his family. That's it, literally. That's, the summary of Genesis chapter 42. For the full episode, please pick it up on our website. That is www.abdiministries.org. You can also get these full episodes by simply navigating to YouTube and searching for a handle, Abdi Ministries. Do the same on Spotify. Search for the same handle. We also on Twitter, on Facebook, and on TikTok. Amen. Or you could simply scan the QR code that is on your screen to go straight to this particular episode.